Hey, welcome to the channel. This is BrogiNaric, and in this video I'm going to be giving my spoiler reviews on the Umbrella Academy Season 1. If you don't want any spoilers, there's a non-spoiler review on the channel. Should be in one of the annotations. If you're fine with spoilers, stay tuned to this video. Alright, number 5, he comes back through the time portal, and he's still 13 even though everyone else is grown up. That's because he messed up the calculations, and in actuality he was in the future. He was 58, and when he came back he's now 58 stuck in his 13-year-old body. I really like how the actor Aidan Gallagher was able to act as an old man. If you notice, he was like walking sort of hunched, and of course the phrases he said, it was really good how he pulled that off. And I love the whole thing where Klaus was messing with him, talking about he hadn't gotten laid and he's stuck in this 13-year-old body, and he's like, well, I had a woman with me for like 30, or I had someone with me for 30 years, her name was Doris. And then you find out that Doris was like a torso up of a mannequin from a department store that he fell in love with. That was one of the funniest things when they showed that, and like how dedicated he was to Doris was hilarious. Number 5, number 5 was great, but he's pretty much a dick. He has no time for his family and their bullshit. He's like, look, I got 8 days to say the apocalypse. He tries to get Vanya, but it doesn't work out. He works with Klaus. That didn't really work out. He's trying to find the owner of that fake eyeball, which I was kind of wondering what was going on with that. But once that kind of comes into play with who owned the eyeball, I thought that was handled very well. Number 3, Allison, played by Emmy Raven Lompin. I thought, for some reason, I was worried she was probably going to be my least favorite character, but watching it, she's really awesome. She's very capable, and I like the whole thing with her using her powers to become an actress, and then how using her powers kind of negatively affect her life, and how it, like, she falls in love with this guy she doesn't really love, but, you know, uses her powers to fall in love with him, and then she uses it on her daughter, and that leads to her divorce. I thought that was handled very well. I liked that she can fight. She's not the best fighter, but she can fight. She can hold her own, and I like that she has very good detective skills. And when she's trying to figure out who Harold Jenkins is, that was really, she did very good job with that. I like Grace. I didn't talk about Grace. Grace was awesome, and I liked the idea of them having a robot mom who's like this weird sort of 50s housewife thing, and like when she was like losing her shit and she didn't know what was going on, and that relationship that her and Diego had was handled very well. I really loved Diego. I liked how he, like, the idea of him being a superhero, but like all the police know who he is, because he's kind of cool with them, but you know, they don't really want him to be there. That was an interesting relationship he had, and I liked how he's like the only one who actually tried to live his own life, and then, as opposed to Luther, who was stuck in the dad's shadow. He really believed in the dad's mission, and when, you know, it was revealed to him that he spent 4 years on the moon just because his dad didn't want to look at him anymore, that was crazy. The thing about that really surprised me in episode 3 when you see he has the monkey body. I knew going into it, in the comic he has the monkey body, he has the gorilla body, but it's like he got in an accident and the dad attached his head onto the body of a Martian gorilla, and I was like, there's no way they're gonna work that into the show. And I thought he had the bigger body under the clothes just as a nod to how he's built in the comic. But then when you find out they did work the ape body in, when he got the, you know, the chemical accident, and then the dad used that injection, that side effect, he has this big, you know, ape body. I thought that was amazing, and the practical effects on that was really good. It reminded me of Mr. Hyde in the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. It sort of looked like that, and it was practical like that, but it looked way better than that. And I liked how much we got to see it, because I thought it was mostly going to be covered, but you'd see it for a good while in the show. Klaus was really funny, and I was worried. I was worried he could be annoying, but no, Klaus is hilarious. And I love the relationship that him and Ben have, because he can talk to dead people, and he sees his brother there who's acting like his consciousness, trying to get him to be a better person, to get off the drugs. Thus, he can use his powers and be more effective, because he feels useless, and he kind of is useless to a degree. But once he starts to get his life in order, which happens after his run-in with Hazel and Chaksha, they kidnap him. He ends up escaping, and he ends up escaping. So wait, there is this group called the Commission. So when number 5 was in the future, he survived, and he's 58. This woman appears before him. She's called the Handler, and she's played by Kate Walsh, and she works for this group called the Commission, and their job is to protect the timeline. Now, they don't control the timeline, but if there's weird anomalies that can bother the timeline, they have to send people in to fix it. Usually fixing it involves killing someone. So that's why 5 is so good, because he's one of the best agents they've had, and he's been this like time traveling assassin. And so the other hitmen, Hazel and Chaksha, has been hired to stop him, and they have these teleporting briefcase. So when Klaus was escaping from them after they kidnapped him, he steals that briefcase. He tries to sell it. He activates it, ends up in 1968 in Vietnam, and he ends up fighting in Vietnam for like 10 months, and he falls in love with this guy named David. And I like how when he came back, he was in like a state of crisis, whether he was like depressed. He didn't know if he wanted to be a better person or to be a worse person. I like that dynamic, and Ben trying to get him on the straight and narrow. Ellen Page as Vanya she did very well. I was kind of not annoyed, but it was like she was kind of very like emotionally stunted, and that was like the character. She was a shrinking Violet. She, all these big personalities, she kind of kept to herself and had to deal with them, yelling at her, because the family is mad at her because she wrote, like 7 years ago from the present, she wrote this tell-all book about the family that exposed all their secrets, and they didn't like that. And that's one of the, besides her not having powers, that's another reason why they look at her as an outcast. So Vanya, she not only plays violin, but she teaches violin, and she ends up getting this new student named Leonard Peabody. And they hit it off, and they start dating, and then her and Leonard, because Leonard is like very positive to her, and he's like, he makes her feel special. He's like, hey, don't worry about this, don't worry about that, don't worry about them, you, be the best person you could be. Leonard Peabody is played by John Magaro, and I liked him in this show. He did very well with this character. Hazel and Chaksha, I did not expect them to be as likable as I thought they were going to be. I like the blue-collar assassins thing going on, and I really like the stuff with Hazel and Agnes, the lady that runs the donut shop. Their love story was awesome. And because at first I was like, is this just a little joke? But like when she got more into the story, it was really, really funny. All the scenes with the flashbacks with them as kids was really good, and I hope we'll see more of that in the second season. I'm assuming we are, but I like seeing them like be a superhero team, and I like all of that, so especially the scene where they stopped the bank robbery. That was a really nice. The kid actors, like the 4-year-old kids, and then like the 13-year-old age kids, they did very well, and I like their costumes and like the idea of them being famous. My favorite episode was episode 6, The Day That Wasn't. And I liked how it played out with that ending where it's like, 5 goes to work with the commission, and so the family, Luther tries to keep them together, but everyone goes in their separate ways. And then, of course, by the end, it's a redo of what happened in 6, and then they bring it back together. But I liked how they explain who the commission are and what they do, all the stuff with the pneumatic tubes. And 5 uses this information to track down the guy, Harold Jenkins, who is the key to the apocalypse. He's like, if we can kill Harold Jenkins, then we can stop the apocalypse. While that's going on, Allison is ready to leave back to California to be with her daughter, and then that's when Luther, at first he finds out that he wasted, his 4 years of his life, and he's willing to go with Allison, and they, want to be together finally instead of bullshitting about it or whatever. Which their relationship, the fact that they're, brother and sister, like not biologically brother and sister, but they were raised as brother and sister, it's a bit weird, but I like the characters enough where it didn't necessarily bother me. And you had Diego and Klaus getting together. Klaus wants to be sober so he can use his powers to talk to his ex David, and at this point, Diego's his ex-girlfriend, who was a detective, was killed by Chaksha, and he's trying to track down Hazel and Chaksha, but he gets sidetracked by Grace, because Diego was very shady throughout the season. He did the thing with the monocle, he did the thing with Grace. Like, it was shady, but it made sense because he knew Luther was going to overreact and think that the mom killed the dad, or he realized that the Grace was out of control. She was not functioning right, so he was like, let me just give a mercy killing. So that was very I like that stuff with Diego. He's an asshole, but he is compassionate at the same time, and he's layered. He's a layered guy. Once they separate, Five figures out a way to get back. He takes one of the time traveling briefcases. He kills the handler. He blows up the rest of the briefcases, and he comes back. The episode starts all over again, and now Five is there to focus them, which is the theme throughout this show. Is Five comes in, he tries to focus them. They get into an argument. Everyone splits away, and then he's got to do something to bring them back together and try it again. And they only got 8 days before the apocalypse is going to happen. So now this time, Luther, instead of leaving with Allison, Diego and Allison figure out who Harold Jenkins is, and then you have Klaus has to help Luther because Luther is depressed that he wasted his 4 years, but now instead of running with Allison, he's like, I want to be more like Klaus, and he's like, I'm going to drink and party and do whatever because, he's just been on the moon for 4 years. He's just like letting loose at the nightclub at the rave, which was funny. Him just being shirtless and dancing. Starts dancing with this chick, and her boyfriend's jealous, and he's gonna try to jump Luther. Klaus tries to save him, but he gets dropped on his head, and he ends up dying. And he ends up going to heaven, and he talks to God, and God's just like, look, I don't really like you like that, so just hurry up and then leave. And in the comic, God is, I believe, portrayed as a cowboy, but in the show, it's portrayed as a girl on a bike. Interesting change. And instead of talking to David, he ends up talking to their dad. And the dad is giving him a shave because it's like at a barber shop. And the dad is like, you on drugs is not a good thing. You're wasting your potential. And he's like blaming it on the dad. And the dad's like, don't blame your problems on me. You all have issues. You blame it on me. You should work on yourself. But of course, they don't do that. They still blame it on the dad. And he lets him know that, like, if you get off the drugs, you can be more powerful. And he also reveals that he killed himself as a way to bring them back together as opposed to trying to call them, because he's like, if I would have called, you guys wouldn't have came, and you guys need to be a team to protect the end of the world. How he knows that the world is ending, we don't know, but that was the reason him bringing them together was to save the world. And he's been training them. He trained them very shittily, but he was training them to be able to save the world. So the thing is, if you've seen it, Vanya had powers all along, and Harold Jenkins, well, actually, her boyfriend, Leonard, is Harold Jenkins, and he has been subtly trying to get her to use her powers in a way to destroy the team, because Harold, he's sort of like a syndrome, basically. He's a guy who's a super fan. He was born on the same day as the other kids, but not through immaculate birth. Like, he had a mom and a dad. His mom died after she gave birth to him, and he was raised by his abusive dad. And he was a super fan of the Umbrella Academy, and he was like, well, maybe I'm special. He tries to go see the team, and then the dad is like, oh, you're not special, get out of here. He gets embarrassed, and so he wants revenge, but before that, he ends up killing his abusive dad, and he goes to prison for 12 years. And in that time, he's like trying to figure out a way to get revenge on the Umbrella Academy. And then this was one of my negatives, my main negative. It was like the plot convenience. He just happened to be walking down the street at the same time that Klaus is coming from the house, and he's got the box that he stole, and he throws out the books inside the box. He's going to try to sell the box, and then Harold goes into the trash and picks up the dad's book that has all the notes and the secrets and stuff about the family, and he sees that, Vanya has powers the whole time. And so that was interesting, and he's like trying to get her to be more comfortable with these abilities. And Vanya's power, she's like a low key like a Dark Phoenix type thing, where her power, she can amplify sound waves, and it could be like the minor sound waves. It could be like the sound of a car muffler, or the beat of her heart. But she can amplify the sound waves to great amounts, and she can do like concussive blasts and like almost like telekinesis. She can like lift things and then move them, manipulate them through the sound. It's very interesting how her powers work and how she uses them in the show. And Harold, he's like setting things up. He's like, he killed the girl that worked with her. He gets jumped he sets up him getting jumped by those guys, which goes too far. That's how he loses his eye. And then you find out that prosthetic eye is part of his eye. Was his, but after a while it gets out of hand. There's that scene where Vanya is confronted by Allison, which was really good, and then she's like, "Oh, you're just jealous because I have powers now, and I can steal your spotlight or whatever." And then you find out Allison, when they were kids, the professor, once he realized that Vanya couldn't control his powers and he was afraid of it, he was like, he gave her the pills that would suppress it, but then he used Allison to use her rumor powers to make Allison think that she was just ordinary. I heard a rumor you thought you were ordinary, and that, mind wiped her ideas of this power. And the kids didn't realize it, and then Allison forgot about it because she was so young. And, Vanya snaps, does the thing, and ends up slicing her throat, which is in the comics. She does slice her throat in the comics, but it actually happens like later in the comic, where like when they're doing the big final battle, but in here it happens earlier. She's not dead. She just got her vocal cords slashed, so she can't talk anymore. Thus, her powers can't work. And so once all this has been explained, Vanya realizes that she's been manipulated by Leonard, aka Harold Jenkins, and so she kills him. And once the others find out that Harold is dead, they're like, well, I guess the apocalypse is over since he was the key. We had to stop him. But of course so everyone's like gonna do their own thing now. Five's like, maybe I should stop. I've been obsessed about this for so long. And Klaus no longer wants to be sober. He's like, I want to get back on drugs. And then Ben stops him and, punches him, which is one of his new powers. And eventually they realize Vanya is out of control. They lock her up. Well, Luther locks her up. Everybody else is like, we shouldn't do this. But he's like, nah, lock her up. She's crazy. And also he's overprotective of Allison. And a little bit, he's the closest like their dad in terms of thinking. But eventually Vanya escapes. Just the beat of her heart is the only sound within that soundproof room. And she amplifies it to knock down that wall. And she's just lashing out on everybody. She's like blowing up parts of the house. She kills Pogo, who, admittedly kept, lied to her about her powers. So she like kills him and just leaves the whole building, but everybody survived. And they have to regroup at the bowling alley. And they, of course, another moment where they're together, Five leaves, then they split apart. But this time they actually got back to, focus on the mission at hand. And that was a whole subplot with the girlfriend. Diego got arrested because he was the number one suspect, but he eventually, he gets out thanks to the girlfriend's partner who knows he didn't kill the girlfriend. They realize they have to stop Vanya because Harold Jenkins was just the fuse. Vanya is the bomb. She's the thing that's really going to set off the apocalypse. And she has this concert, and they're like, oh, that's probably when it's going to happen, so we have to go to her concert and stop her. And they get attacked at the bowling alley by these stormtrooper guys, so they all have to get out of there. They go to the where the concert is. And then in the meantime, Hazel and Chaksha have been fighting each other because when Five was working at the commission, he sent them their messages to say eliminate each other, and they held off on it. But then they started, well, it was mainly Chaksha, since she's, dedicated to her job. She starts trying to kill Hazel. Hazel's like, look, I don't want to do this job anymore. I want to leave the commission. I want to go with Agnes and just live out the last couple hours we have before the world ends. And because the handler comes back, she didn't die. She's like a super soldier, just like Hazel and Chaksha, but it took her a couple decades for them to rebuild her after getting blown up. And I like when they had the plan to stop Vanya. Allison wants to talk to her, and Luther works a plan around that to jump her from the side, and Klaus has to watch the exit. But he's such a fuck up that he goes across the street to get something to eat, and then that allows the stormtrooper guys to come in and start attacking them. They work for the commission, and so, and so there's the whole thing where they're pinned down. Five comes back after being distracted by the handler, and they don't know what to do. because you know these stormtroopers are actually really good. And then that's when Klaus uses his newfound power, where he brings Ben to the land of the living, and Ben uses his powers, which is in the comic they explain it like his skin can open up a dimension open up to another dimension where there's these monsters, and so like they depict it with these tentacles coming out of his chest, and he's just like ripping the shit out of the bad guys and kills all of them. And then once again they try to jump Vanya, but she catches them, and she's holding the four of them and like kind of draining their life force. And while she's like playing her violin, she's building up this energy, this white energy, and she turns into what in the comics she's called the white violin. And it's a nod to her with being all white, and then also the violin being white when they focus on that a little bit at the end. And so Allison comes up behind her and is aiming to shoot her at the head, but she doesn't. She shoots like right by her head, and the shockwave of the gun, the sound of the gun, takes her out of her trance. And instead of, she like focus her beam, and it goes up and it shoots into the moon. Now in the comic it was number 5 who shoots her. He shoots her in the head, but she doesn't die. She gets brain damage and motor function problems, so her and Allison have to go through rehab together. But by them shooting at the moon, it then causes, it's a very like it doesn't blow up the moon, but it's enough where the big chunk of the moon falls out and it's headed towards Earth. And so they're like, well shit, what do we do now? And number 5 is like, well, I haven't tried it, but maybe I can teleport us back into the past and try to fix this. And they're like, I guess, let's do it. So he uses his powers to try to teleport them into the past. Hazel goes back to the hotel, kills the handler, and gets his girlfriend Agnes, and then they just take her time traveling briefcase and just pieces out. Shock, you know, everybody else is pretty much screwed. But as they're going back in time, they turn to their like 13-year-old selves. So I'm assuming the next season is going to, at least the beginning, is going to focus on them as the kids and trying not to be shitty to Vanya, and actually trying to help the dad actually train Vanya. But that's the thing about Vanya. She's not completely innocent, because they do show when Vanya was a little girl, she was a badass kid. When she was like beating the hell out of the different nannies, where she was using the power to throw them around and throw one of them out the window, and all that shit stopped once they created Grace. That was really interesting. So she's not like entirely, like, I get she was, you know, treated unfairly by her brothers and sisters, but she wasn't completely innocent. So that, I liked how they played that. Definitely looking forward to a season 2, because the comic, like I said, I haven't read the comic, but there's not that much source material. They used the main source material for this first season, so what they have for the next season is going to be a lot of new stuff, and that should be very interesting. Like I said, the budget, hopefully they can have an even bigger budget next season, because they did amazing with what they had with this one. And those are the main things I wanted to talk about. Let me know what was some of your favorite stuff from season 1 of the Umbrella Academy. Who was your favorite characters? I'm still debating. It's between 3. It's between Klaus, Diego, and number 5, because they were all great. And I, you know, so let me know what you thought about the show in the comments. Hit the like button. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to the channel. Check out other videos on this channel, and come back for more videos. Peace.
Finish this thought. I am a slave to...